The hinges creaked as they carried the last box through the door, and beneath their feet, something old shifted in the dark. Emma pressed her palm against the cool plaster wall, feeling the pulse of the house settle around them. The village had been silent when they arrived, windows dark, streets empty, as if the town itself had long forgotten how to breathe. Marc dropped their suitcase near the fireplace, dust rising in lazy spirals through the amber light. The floorboards groaned under his weight, a sound that seemed to travel deeper than wood should allow. Night fell quickly in the valley, swallowing the last threads of daylight. Emma unpacked their dishes in the kitchen, while Marc assembled their bed upstairs, his footsteps rhythmic against the ceiling. She paused, hands submerged in soapy water, listening to the way sound moved through the bones of this place. Everything echoed strangely here, as if the walls themselves were hollow. They ate dinner by candlelight, the electricity still temperamental, and talked about paint colors and garden plans. But beneath their voices, barely audible at first, came a sound that made Emma's fork pause halfway to her mouth, a soft scraping, like nails dragging slowly across wood. It came from below, from the space between floor and earth. Marc tilted his head, listening. The scraping continued for 3 seconds, 4, then stopped. They waited in silence, watching the floorboards as if they might offer explanation. Nothing moved. Marc laughed awkwardly, suggested it was pipes or settling foundation, but Emma noticed how his eyes kept drifting downward throughout the rest of their meal. That night, Emma lay awake while Marc's breathing deepened into sleep beside her. The house creaked and whispered around them, old timber contracting in the cold. But underneath those familiar sounds, that scraping returned, slower now, deliberate, tracing a path beneath their bedroom floor. She pressed her ear to the mattress, trying to pinpoint the source, and the scraping stopped the instant her skin touched fabric. Morning brought pale sunlight through lace curtains and the rational comfort of daylight. Marc called an artisan from the village, a weathered man named Bernard, who arrived smelling of tobacco and damp earth. He spent an hour in their basement, tapping walls and inspecting joists with a flashlight that barely penetrated the dark down there. Bernard emerged, wiping his hands on his trousers, his expression unreadable. Nothing structural, he assured them, just old wood settling into new weight. Houses this age always talked, especially to new occupants. He accepted coffee but didn't meet Emma's eyes when she asked if he'd heard anything unusual. He left quickly, his truck disappearing around the bend before noon. The second evening arrived with fog that pressed against their windows like pale hands. Emma cooked while Marc worked on his laptop at the dining table, the glow of his screen the only brightness in the thickening gloom. She was chopping vegetables when she heard it again, that scraping sound. But this time it carried something else threaded through it. A whisper, barely formed, like breath pushed through a too small space. She froze, knife suspended above the cutting board. The whisper came again, rising through the floorboards near her feet. It shaped itself into syllables, distorted and wrong, but unmistakably her name, Emma. Not quite her voice, not quite anyone's voice, but something that had learned the shape of the word by listening through cracks. Marc heard it too this time. He stood so quickly, his chair toppled backward, the crash unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. They stared at the floor between them, at the worn oak planks that had supported generations of footsteps. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the whisper returned, and this time it called for Marc. His name stretched and twisted like something pulled through wet cloth. Emma's phone showed no signal, the screen's glow weak and useless. Marc grabbed a flashlight and moved toward the basement door, but Emma caught his arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. The whispering had grown louder, no longer coming from just one spot, but traveling beneath them, circling the room's perimeter like something pacing in the dark below. They stood back to back in the center of the living room, listening to their names called over and over in that distorted voice. Emma counted 7 distinct whispers before they stopped, leaving only the sound of their own breathing and the drumming of her heart against her ribs. The silence that followed felt worse than the whispers, thick and expectant. Sleep didn't come that night. They sat together on the couch, lights blazing in every room they could reach, watching the floorboards for any sign of movement. Emma dozed near dawn, her head heavy on Marc's shoulder, and woke to pale morning light and the conviction that they needed to leave. But daylight brought shame to night terrors, and Marc insisted they couldn't abandon the house over strange sounds. They'd invested everything in this place, this dream of rural peace. He suggested carbon monoxide, shared hallucination, stress from the move. Emma wanted to believe him, wanted the rational explanations to hold weight against the memory of her name whispered from below. The third evening came too quickly. Emma had spent the day researching the house's history at the village library, finding only vague references to previous owners and a fire in the 1800s that had damaged the original structure. The librarian, an elderly woman with milky eyes, had watched her search with an expression Emma couldn't read. They ate dinner in silence, neither willing to voice the dread that had settled over them like frost. The sun set early behind heavy clouds, and darkness filled their home with unusual speed. Emma washed dishes while Marc double-checked the locks, a futile gesture against whatever lived beneath their feet. The first creak came at 8:47, a single floorboard near the fireplace, lifting slightly, then settling back. Emma saw it move, watched the wood shift, as if something beneath had pressed upward against it. Marc crossed the room in 3 strides, staring down at the plank that now lay flush and innocent. Then another board creaked, this one near the dining table, and another by the stairs, and another near the kitchen doorway. The sounds came from different locations, simultaneous and impossible, as if multiple somethings moved beneath the floor at once. The house filled with the groan and crack of shifting wood, a symphony of movement that had no visible source. Emma backed toward the front door, her hand finding the cold metal of the knob, but before she could turn it, all sound stopped. Complete silence, so absolute it rang in her ears like the aftermath of thunder. Marc stood frozen in the center of the room, his eyes wide and fixed on the floor beneath him. The planks began to rise, not cracking or breaking, but lifting smoothly, as if hinged from below. The gap that appeared was pure darkness, deeper than the shallow crawlspace should allow. Emma could smell it now, the air pushing up through that opening, thick with earth and rot, and something else, something that smelled like old meat left too long in summer heat. Marc stumbled backward as more boards lifted, the gap widening into a ragged opening 3 feet across. The darkness beneath seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in rhythm with Emma's racing pulse. She wanted to scream, wanted to run, but her body had gone rigid with a terror so profound it erased thought. The hand came through slowly, fingers first, pressing up between 2 remaining planks near Marc's feet. The skin was gray and loose, nails long and yellow, knuckles swollen with fluid or decay. It moved with deliberate patience, exploring the texture of the wood, learning the geography of the surface world. Marc tried to move, but his feet tangled and he fell, landing hard on his hip. The hand adjusted its position, fingers spreading wide, searching. Emma found her voice then, screaming his name, breaking through her paralysis to lunge forward. But the hand was faster, those long fingers wrapping around Marc's ankle with impossible strength. He kicked and thrashed, his hand scrabbling for purchase on the smooth floor, but the grip didn't loosen. Emma grabbed his arms, pulling with everything she had. But it was like fighting a current, something vast and patient that would eventually win through simple endurance. Marc's scream filled the house as he was dragged inch by inch toward the opening. Emma's hand found the fallen flashlight, and she swung it hard, connecting with the gray flesh. The hand spasmed, but didn't release, and now she could see past it, into the darkness below. Movement down there, pale shapes shifting in depths that shouldn't exist beneath a house. And faces, dozens of them, pressed against the underside of the remaining floorboards, mouths moving in silent whispers. She hit the hand again and again, the flashlight cracking and then shattering, plastic and glass raining down. The fingers finally loosened, and Marc scrambled backward, his ankle bleeding where the nails had dug in. They ran for the door, Emma's fingers slipping on the knob before it finally turned. Cold night air hit their faces as they burst onto the porch, not stopping until they reached the gravel driveway. Behind them, the house sat quiet and still, warm light glowing in the windows they'd left blazing. Nothing moved in those lit rooms. Nothing suggested the horror that had just unfolded. They drove to the village inn, Marc's hands shaking on the wheel, and paid cash for a room. The innkeeper asked no questions, though Emma saw recognition in her eyes when she learned which house they'd fled. That night, wrapped in thin blankets that smelled of lavender, Emma researched on her phone until her battery died. The house had been built on old burial ground, she learned, graves from a plague year that had been forgotten and then built over. The fire in 1803 had started in the basement, trapping the family that lived there. Their bodies had been found days later, pulled down through gaps in the burned floor into the earth below. Every family since had lasted less than a month. Some left in the night like Emma and Marc. Others simply disappeared, their belongings found arranged neatly as if they'd just stepped out for a moment. The village had stopped talking about it decades ago, had learned to accept the house as something separate, something best left alone. Marc's ankle wound wouldn't heal properly, the scratches turning black at the edges, no matter how much antibiotic cream Emma applied. He woke each night at the same time, 3:47, claiming he heard his name whispered from the floor beneath their in bed. The innkeeper had moved them to a ground floor room without explanation. They never went back for their belongings. The house was sold at auction 6 months later to a young couple from Paris who thought the village charm and low price worth the risk. Emma saw their photograph in the local paper, smiling on the porch, and wondered how long they would last. Sometimes, in the deepest part of night, Emma still hears the scraping beneath whatever floor she walks on, a reminder that some places remember what lies beneath, and some hungers are patient enough to wait through generations for the right moment to reach up through the dark. If this story still crawls beneath your thoughts like fingers under floorboards, there are deeper places waiting in the dark. Subscribe, and we'll show you what else whispers from below. But remember, some houses never really let you leave. They just wait for you to stop running. For the moment you finally stand still long enough for the floor beneath your feet to open wide.